2, 1, go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Priya Dulapeta, one of the Vice Presidents of WAM USA. I'm super excited to welcome you all for the first WAM USA educational webinar series, Health is Wealth. So today we are having exclusive interactive health webinar with our special guests. Request all of you to participate, involve, and also please ask your questions in the Zoom chat during the session or raise your hands. And we will try to address most of the questions depending on the time we have. Good news is that we are doing this live. So if anyone has missed today's webinar, then they can view it on YouTube at later date. So before we start the event, I would like to introduce our guest today, not in any order. Our first guest is Dr. Amit Guttigoli. He's a cardiologist and cardiac electrophysiologist in Dallas, Texas, and he's been practicing for over 18 years. He's the founding president of Premier Cardiovascular Care of Dallas and medical director of Advanced Surgical Center. Dr. Guttigoli will be the president of the Texas Indo-American Physician Society Northeast chapter in 2023. They have embarked on an education campaign called The Heart of the Matter to educate the community about the risks of heart diseases. We welcome Dr. Amit Guttigoli. Before I announce our next guest, I would request everybody to mute if you're not speaking and raise your hand when required. Our next guest would be Dr. Sumana Gangi. Dr. Sumana Gangi is the founder and president of Southern Endocrinology Associates, one of the largest group of clinical endocrinologists in DFW. She is also clinical associate professor at UTSW Medical School. She's a principal investigator for many diabetes, cardiovascular outcome studies, and obesity research. Welcome, Dr. Sumana Gangi. Our next guest would be Dr. Ravi Chandrasekhara. Dr. Ravi Chandrasekhara is a cardiologist based in Dallas, Texas. He has been practicing for over 20 years. His interests are non-invasive testing. So welcome, Dr. Ravi Chandrasekhara. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to one of our WAM Vice President, Mr. Chinni, who will be our facilitator today. And he will also introduce our other key guests, and he will kick off the event for us. Thank you. And over to you, Mr. Chinni.
Thank you. Thank you, WAM Priya. Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Amit, welcome to the WAM USA webinar series of health topics. And we thank you for taking your time to be part of this and sharing the important information about this afternoon's topic. Welcome again, Dr. Amit.
Thank you, Chinni. Should I start sharing my screen?
Good to see you. One question before you start.
Sure.
Is this the so-called topic this afternoon's, right? Is heart attacks? Can they be preventable?
Well, that's a great question. And that's what we're going to be discussing, how we can mitigate the risks. I mean, nothing is 100% preventable, but let's see what we can do as a community and as individuals to mitigate the risks of cardiovascular disease and heart attacks.
Good to know. Good to know from professionals, right? There are so many things we hear and there. That's what we want to really learn about, from you all. Thank you so much. Please go ahead and then do say what you have to say for the community. Thank you, Amit.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, can you see my screen here?
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, thank you, Chinni and the WAM organization for inviting us. We are here representing the Texas Indo-American Physician Society and also as physicians in the community trying to educate people about what we know or what we are experts in. So without further ado, let me get started. Okay. Let me see. I'm having some technical difficulties here.
We totally understand. You are a medical professional, not a tech
No, this
professional,
is
right?
fine.
Take your time, doc. Take your time.
It's not moving. So I just want to make sure why is it not moving? So I got this thing here. Okay, let me see why okay, there you go. All right. So I want to minimize everyone. Okay, so the topic of today's discussion is the heart of the matter, reducing cardiovascular risk. We'll see why this is the heart of everyone's existence for obvious reasons, but we'll look at some data. So before we proceed, what is cardiovascular disease? We hear all kinds of terms. Heart attacks, or in medical terms, we call myocardial infarctions. This is when there is a blockage in the blood vessel of the heart. So, and this is typically presents as chest pain or angina. This is your classic heart attack, where the blood vessel supplying the heart muscle either gets partially or totally occluded. Then the other term you'll come across is heart failure or congestive heart failure. This is when the heart is not an effective pump any longer. It's not functioning to its maximal capacity. And the typical symptoms are shortness of breath and fatigue. These are typical symptoms. Then you also hear of someone having a cardiac arrest or sudden cardiac death, or people just passing out and dying suddenly. These are typically due to dangerous rhythms of the heart. And these can be caused by a electrical problem of the heart, or they could also be caused by heart attacks. Heart attacks can cause electrical problems of the heart and result in dangerous rhythms of the heart. This is where you see in TV shows or in person, you may have seen people pass out, and then you put the automatic external defibrillator, and then they shock the person, and they get them out of the dangerous rhythms. This is what cardiac arrest is. Then the other thing is strokes. These are all part of the cardiovascular disease family. Strokes, as you know, people come with weakness of the arm, or they can't speak, or they pass out again, they have altered mental status or confusion. So these are the spectrum of symptoms you can have with a stroke. And then also you have something called as peripheral arterial disease, or circulation problems, where people can have pain in the legs, thighs, or gangrene. These are all due to blockages in the blood vessels of the extremities typically. So this is the spectrum of cardiovascular disease. Now, cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death in the world, over 18 million deaths annually. And in the US alone, there's about 900,000 deaths if you include heart attacks and strokes. That's almost twice that from cancer. Also, when you look at the burden of the disease by across the world, you see that both the burden in terms of disability and lives lost is almost close to 400 million. Next is cancer at around 250 million. And as I mentioned, it claims close to 900,000 lives in the US, 18 million overall. And then there's one death every 39 seconds due to coronary artery disease. CAD is also called as coronary artery disease. Coronaries are the blood vessels supplying the heart, coronary arteries. And then there's one stroke every 3 minutes. Now, minorities compared to the white population are at a higher risk of having cardiovascular disease. Blacks and Hispanic adults have twice the risk of white adults. And specifically, our community of South Asians, we are at the highest risk of coronary artery disease and cardiovascular disease. So we are at about 3 times the risk compared to the US national average. Also, compared to other ethnic minorities, Chinese, Japanese, we are at a much higher risk of cardiovascular disease. In addition, the complications due to coronary artery disease or cardiovascular disease is almost 2 to 4 times that of other ethnic groups. So it's not only more common in our population, but it's also more malignant. In addition, being South Asian in itself, like all of us on this call, just being South Asian is a risk factor for coronary artery disease or cardiovascular disease. So even if you don't smoke, drink, or anything, just because of our ethnicity and genes, we are at risk. So we especially have to take a lot of care and on about our lifestyle and other risk factors to prevent the complications of cardiovascular disease. I heard this one statistic that I've not confirmed yet, but it was kind of very striking. They say that South Asians make up about 25% of the world's population, but we account for about 60% of the entire cardiovascular disease burden. So that's a very staggering statistic. It's something for all of us to think. So how do we prevent, or how do we address cardiovascular disease? So, you see this picture here of a river flowing. If the river represents cardiovascular disease, then there are people who are developing heart attacks, strokes, and most of our resources, 95% of our resources are here downstream after the event has occurred. We put stents, we put defibrillators, we put pacemakers. Especially in my profession as a cardiac electrophysiologist, I implant something called as defibrillators in people who have had a heart attack or who had a weak heart and who are at a very high risk of developing these dangerous rhythms of the heart. So I put them here at the very end before they go into the sea, if this represents death, if you may. But we have to go and figure out, why are people falling in the river? Or up here, upstream, we have to go and try to prevent people from falling into the river. That's where we have most of our impact. That's where we can save most lives. So let's see what we can do to mitigate the risks. So as Chini ji mentioned, or Priya ji mentioned, that I'm going to be the president of the Texas Indo-American Physician Society next year, and Dr. Sumana Gangi is the president-elect. So she's going to be the president in 2024. So we've embarked on this education campaign for the community to try and address some of these questions. And we have a campaign slogan called #LiveTheDream. So let's see what the slogan is all about. So #LiveTheDream. D stands for diabetes and lipid management. Lipid is also known as cholesterol. R is for reduce hypertension. E is for eat right and exercise. A is for adequate sleep. And M is for mind that lifestyle and mindfulness. So we wanted to give the community a simple slogan to remember. So that's why we came up with this #LiveTheDream. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these topics. And first, diabetes and lipid management. Dr. Sumana Gangi, being an endocrinologist and a diabetes specialist, she's going to talk about some of these things in her talk, but I'm going to just touch on these things very briefly. So the prevalence of diabetes mellitus is almost 37 million in the US, about 11.3% of the population. That's a very high percentage. In India, it's probably a little higher, a lot of it undiagnosed. Also in minorities, it's a little higher than white Americans. And there is a study going on for the last 10 years called the Masala study. It stands for Mediators of Atherosclerosis in Asians living in America. This is about people like South Asians who have moved to the West, and they've looked at coronary artery disease, strokes, and atherosclerosis in this population. And they found that about 23% of South Asian Americans can have type 2 diabetes mellitus. Now, diabetes, there's no just one pill that can solve the problems of diabetes. It is a team approach, and you need to address several aspects of your life, including pharmacological therapy, to take care of diabetes. The ABCs of diabetes are, you must have heard of hemoglobin A1C, or glycated hemoglobin, should be less than 7%. B is for the blood pressure should be very tightly controlled in diabetics, keeping it less than 120/80. And C is for cholesterol levels. LDL, which is one of the types of cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, should be less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. For all practical purposes, having diabetes should be considered as having coronary artery disease, or cardiovascular disease. You can see that I'm using these terms interchangeably. So if I say one thing, I'm referring to the other as well. And Dr. Gangi will go into some depth about about diabetes and lipids in a little bit. Now, D also is for cholesterol and lipid control. You can see here that when you have very high cholesterols, dangerous levels are LDL greater than 160, HDL under 40 in male and under 50 in females. And our population, South Asians, typically have very low HDL and a high triglycerides. That's the other cholesterol component. A heart healthy cholesterol profile would be LDL under 100. Now, these are people who do not have coronary artery disease. In people with established coronary artery disease, they say the LDL should be less than 70 or even lower now. Now, screening for high cholesterol. In view of the high incidence and prevalence of childhood obesity, they said that children should be screened at 9 to 11 years. And then adults in the early 20s should be screened, and then it should be checked every 4 to 6 years. It's a fasting blood test where they check for the lipid profile. And it's become more and more important to keep an eye on it because of poor diet, sedentary lifestyle, and the high incidence and rising incidence and prevalence of childhood obesity and diabetes. Now, you can do several things in your life to control cholesterol or lipids. You got to eat a well-balanced diet that we'll talk about in a little bit, and low saturated fat and trans fat consumption, healthy diet, fats into your diet, of course, exercise regularly, and then avoid frying your foods. I know this is a challenge for our community, but this is one of the fried stuff is one of the reasons for the high levels of triglycerides in our lipid profile. And of course, you got to stop smoking. And the other thing is, if your physician thinks that you need medication despite this lifestyle changes, then there are several medications that can address different aspects of cholesterol management. Now, the R is for reduce hypertension. Hypertension is a silent killer. The AHA goal is less than 130 by 80. And the initial steps are a lifestyle modification and exercise, diet and exercise. We have something called as the DASH diet, which a dietary approach to stop hypertension. It limits food that is high in sodium, saturated fats, and added sugars. And despite this, if you need medications, then it should be done under physician supervision. But hypertension needs to be recognized and treated appropriately. Otherwise, it can affect every aspect of your body, from your eyes, your heart, your kidneys, and the rest of your body. And the E is eat right. So the US Department of Agriculture recommends that you need to take, and that's what I tell my patients, these diets that we go on are all fats, the keto diet and the all the different diets, the Atkins diet. I mean, all these are good for a while, but if you want to make something practical and something that can be followed on a long-term basis, then I tell my patients, you take a medium-sized plate, half of it should be vegetables and fruits, okay? And then the other one quarter should be your proteins. And protein should come from, if you're a vegetarian, then it can come from beans, legumes, lentils, quinoa, tofu, and all that. But if you eat non-vegetarian, then it should be fish and lean cuts of meats. Then the grains, the bread. Now that's very important. 25% should be your breads, but then they should come from whole grains. Most of the breads we eat nowadays, white bread and chapatis that have maida and all that, these are bad for your physiology. Of course, drink a lot of water, avoid carbonated drinks. So here we see heart healthy ingredients. You have plant proteins. Nowadays, the thinking is that plant-based diet is the best, but of course, this is subject to debate, and we're not going to go into this. But if you have to eat meat, then avoid processed meats and red meat. Seafood and poultry and lean cuts of meat are acceptable. Carbs, as we said, veggies and fruits, whole grains, and then fats. There are always, not all fats are bad. Fats from nuts, seeds, avocados, olives, and oils derived from these are good. Then these foods are linked to cardiovascular disease. Processed food, highly processed foods, the chips, the sodas, and all that. And then red meats, processed grains, maida, white bread, fried foods are, budgies, the pakoras, and all that. And then foods high in saturated fats and trans fats. And the most important and the number one culprit, which is the number one evil, almost poisonous to us, is added sugar. So these are some of the foods that everyone loves, but these are the ones that are harmful for cardiovascular disease, that contribute to cardiovascular disease. I came across somewhere that in the US, and this is in all adults and actually over 2 years old, these are the 5 top sources of calories, which is really very appalling. Desserts are the number one sources of calories. Number 2 are breads, white breads and rolls. Then chicken is number 3. Then drinks, soda, which people love. These are some of the worst form of calorie intake because they have a huge amount of added sugar. And then number 5 is pizza. You ask any kid in the USA, they love their pizza, and adults too. So what's the problem with sugar? I'm going to give a very simplistic view. Dr. Gangi, who's the expert, will probably give a more involved view if you're needed. But refined sugar and simple added sugar, it gives a spike in the blood glucose. This gives rise to increased insulin release. Eventually, with altered physiology and hormones, hormonal physiology, it causes insulin resistance and leptin resistance. Leptin is a hormone that regulates your hunger based on your energy needs. And this gets messed up. The levels are high, but the body develops leptin resistance. This results in overeating, obesity, increased abdominal fat, which is the worst kind of fat that you can have, and of course, diabetes, and eventually leads to cardiovascular disease. So added sugars are the number one culprit, adding to our pandemic of cardiovascular disease. Some people call it garbage. For Asian Indians, sometimes, I was doing some research, and currently, and I have US statistics, and India may be close to these statistics, that an average American consumes about 70 kilograms of sugar per year. Only about 100 years ago, it was 5 kilograms per year. We've grown 20% in the last year, 20% of increase in sugar consumption in the last 100 years, sorry. Okay, this is really appalling. And then if you eat about 2,000 calories a day, then only about 5 to 10% of your calories should come from sugar. Whereas nowadays, about 25, 30%, 40, 50% of our calories sometimes comes from this processed sugars and processed carbs and added sugars. And just to give you an idea, half a cup of can of soda has about 25 grams of sugar. I was just talking to a patient of mine, and she was drinking a flavored drink, and I asked her to read the contents, and that had 75 grams of sugar. That's like 3 times your daily consumption in just one bottle of flavored drink, right? And then there's sources of hidden sources of sugar, like your cereals, your flavored yogurt, snack bars. So it's very important to look at the nutrition contents of anything that you eat if you really want to be careful about how much sugar you consume. If there's one message we want you to take, is you need to recognize how much sugars, processed carbohydrates, and added sugar that you're consuming on a daily basis. Now, exercise. Of course, exercise, everyone knows the benefits of exercises. Decreases hypertension, diabetes, obesity, decreases cardiovascular disease, then promotes psychological health and well-being, releases endorphins if you run outside, free oxygen radicals, and it also promotes healthy eating habits, and also shown to reduce all-cause mortality and morbidity. That means you'll just live longer if you exercise on a regular basis. And most importantly, it's the best way to stay and look young. So if nothing else, that should be an incentive for you to exercise. Now, we should encourage everyone to exercise 7 days a week. But if you say 7 days, then they'll probably exercise for 4 or 5 days a week. And then typically there's 4 kinds of exercises, cardiovascular, you're running, elliptical, flexibility, stretching, yoga, strength training. That's extremely important. You got to train your muscles as well. There's something called a sarcopenia, or penia means scantness of something. So sarco is muscle. So your muscles get atrophied or deconditioned, and that's a big problem in South Asians. So muscle training, or weight training should be an essential component of your daily exercise regime. You don't have to do it every day. You can do it 2 to 3 times a week, but you need to do it at some point in the week. And then exercise per your liking and enjoyment. Do it according to your physical limitations, and definitely avoid injuries. If you need a trainer in the initial time when you start doing exercises, don't hesitate to engage a trainer who will teach you how to do the exercises well. And then people do 10,000 steps, which is a good thing. There's no definite scientific data to support it. However, it's hard to reach 10,000 steps without exercise. So that means that you are really consciously trying to do something in addition to just routine activity to reach those 10,000 steps. So if you're doing the 10 to 15,000 steps, by all means, go ahead and continue doing that. So the AHA recommends moderate intensity aerobic activity about 5 days a week for about 30 minutes, about 150 minutes every week, and some muscle strengthening activities. Moderate intensity means that you're able to complete a sentence while doing the exercise. Okay. And it also says you should do about 2 to 3 times a week. You should do some muscle strengthening activities. Or you can do vigorous intensity aerobic activity like jogging, running, some HIIT, high intensity interval training. Again, there you got to be careful to avoid injuries. And also, you should do muscle strengthening activities about 2 to 3 times a week. Now, sedentary lifestyle. 2 of the biggest culprits of sedentary lifestyle are TV or a streaming device and the workplace. Most of us sit in our workplace. So consider having a stand-up desk. And one of the biggest reasons to not exercise is people say they have no time. In the US, I heard that an average American spends about 30 hours per week of TV. So if they can't spend about 10% of the time, 10 to 15% of the time for their health, then it's really not a good thing. We should encourage every individual to exercise. Now, there are some people, the couch potatoes, who are very resistant to exercise. In such people, one suggestion is you can advise them to exercise just 5 minutes daily for a month, not more. If they want to do more exercise, let them increase the pace or the intensity of the exercise, but just for 5 minutes every month for 30 days. And then after 30 days, let them increase it by 5 minutes for another month. So that way they'll get addicted to it, they'll get used to it, and they would want to exercise. Here are some tips. The last 2 things are, A is for adequate sleep. Now, sleep is your superpower. If you can get 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night, preferably, now that really decreases your risk of cardiovascular disease. It makes you more alert. You eat right. You exercise on a regular basis. Your entire life turns around if you can get those 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And it doesn't matter if you're young or old. Even the older people do need those 7 to 9 hours of sleep. It improves your immunity. It reduces your risk of type 2 diabetes because you eat better and you eat healthier. People who are tired, who have not slept, they tend to increase more chips and soda. And you've seen that in your life, in your community, that people who work night shifts in itself is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And also it's a risk factor for cancer because of lack of sleep. There's an experiment that goes on every year on 1.6 billion people, and this is called daytime savings. In the spring, we go forward by an hour, we spring forward, and in the fall, we turn the clocks back by an hour. So in the spring, they've shown that on the Monday following daylight savings, there's up to a 24% increase in heart attacks. And conversely, when people sleep an hour extra in the fall, there's a 22% decrease in heart attacks. So that's something to sleep over. So best sleep hygiene practices is one important, everyone says that go to sleep and wake up at the same time. And it's not easy, but if you can make a routine, then that's the best way. And of course, switch off all devices, and then no heavy meals for 3 hours prior, avoid alcohol and coffee after lunch, and make your room as dark as possible, and keep your room cool. The M, which is the last part of the live the dream. M is for mind-led lifestyle. Absolutely no tobacco or drugs. In 2022, no one should be smoking, and no one should be using illicit drugs. Now, alcohol, everyone says, oh, alcohol, they say is beneficial for you. Alcohol in very moderate amounts, which is just 1 to 2 drinks a day, or 4 to 8 ounces, which is a very small amount of wine per day. That's part of the Mediterranean diet. May have some benefits. However, higher amounts can cause stroke, hypertension, cardiomyopathy. So if you're drinking for health reasons, then don't drink. Okay. If you're drinking for socialization, then stick to moderate amounts. But avoiding alcohol is still the best. Then the last M is for mindfulness. We come from the country of meditation. This is no longer fringe medicine. There have been books written, there have been a lot of articles being published now about the impact of meditation and mindfulness-based stress reduction on our health and on our cardiovascular health, on our wellness. So this is something that everyone should engage in. Allopathic physician, this may sound very weird, but yes, everyone should involve. In fact, in lifestyle modification for reduction of hypertension, yoga and mindful breathing techniques have been incorporated in the latest American social guidelines. So yes, and there is a white paper by the AHA on meditation. So all these are becoming mainstream. So this is the Live the Dream campaign. I hope you all got some information. Thank you again for having me here, having our organization here. And I'll hand it over to Chiniji. Thank you, Chiniji. We can take questions later, right?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Amit. That's a really lot of information, and you went through so clear and simple and crisp, so that you get to the point, and then these are the things that really kind of people need to notice. Yes, questions and answers we can take later. But one thing is, as it's fresh, right? I mean, for myself, it's a lot of information that you provided. Thank you so much for that. This is, really good information. And just as things are fresh, a couple of questions, Dr. Amit, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned, right, and for South Asian specifically, coronary artery diseases, right? That's one of those, on the bottom, the dangerous zone. How do we actually in general should focus on that so that we can get away from the CAD? Are there any kind of pointers specifically for South Asians? Or
yeah. So one thing is, and I think Dr. Gangi is going to talk about food and all that, so I'll let her talk. But one thing is, probably genetics does play a role, and there's a lot of study being done on the genetics. And but more importantly, people are realizing that it is a lifestyle that we have, especially the foods we eat. When many people say, oh, I'm vegetarian, and even then, my uncle was vegetarian like all his life, and he had a heart attack at 50, See, when you have, even if you say you're a vegetarian, it's very important to eat your vegetables and your grains and all that in Grains, of course, you can't eat uncooked, but vegetables and fruits, we should eat it in the rawest form, or they're steamed or baked. Our problem is we add a lot of, we either fry it or we add a lot of other things like unhealthy oils. And the other problem we have is simple sugars. Most of our sugars are what we consume, the grains are the simple sugars, which again give rise to a spike in our blood glucose, increase in insulin release, and then insulin resistance eventually. So these are some of the things that we can address. And then, of course, exercise. We need to be more diligent about exercising, right? And also exercise, as I mentioned, start slow and then increase as you go ahead. I mean, it's all the same things that I mentioned.
Yeah.
In Live the Dream. All these things are applicable to us.
Okay. Perfect. That's pretty good. And you mentioned that, right? Sleeping is per day. It's like to the minimum 7 to 9 hours. We should make a practice of that. And in that, even though we all know that we all should have a rest, good rest, like in sleep mode for 7 to 9 hours. But today's lifestyle, we all know that leading us not be able to dedicate that 7 to 9 hours of sleep, right? That we all know that is a kind of a challenge. In these terms, Dr. Amit, can we split this sleeping in two kind of 2 times in a day, like 6 hours, and plus in a day or whatever, during the day 2 more hours, so that my total sleep is 8 hours?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Okay, it is challenging to find the chunk of 7 to 9 hours, 7 to 8 hours at one time, right? So ideally, it should be all in the nighttime. We are the only species that can resist sleep. Otherwise, most of the birds and animals, once they get sleepy, they go to sleep. But humans are the only species that alter their sleep patterns, right? Because we have lights, we have all this night life and all that. Most species don't do that. So ideally, you have to be. It should be in a chunk in the night. But then, if you cannot do that, then you can split it. Okay, but then you can't keep collecting the sleep deprivation over days and say that you'll catch up over the weekends. That's not beneficial, or at least it's been studied in detail.
Yeah, I mean, that was my follow-up question, because when we have a weekend, we tend to sleep more number of hours, like 10 hours or 11 hours, think that it balances out, but that's not the case, right? And
that's not ideal.
It's not ideal, right? Yeah. And as a matter of, and you also mentioned the sleep pattern, right? Same time, like make it a routine every day. Would that actually make any impact for people who goes to bed very late, like at 12, 12:30, 1 o'clock or 1:30, and then make up their 8 hours?
Yeah.
Is that still be okay, ideal, or
yeah?
What do you say
So
about that?
actually,
Can you comment?
there are early sleepers and there are night owls. There are, and it doesn't matter. Both of them get the same amount of benefit as long as they get their 7 to 8 or 7 to 9 hours. So yes, they can go to bed late and wake up late, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong in early to bed, early to rise. That's not truly a real scientifically based saying.
Okay, got it. That's what I wanted to share with the community from your own words, right? We tend to kind of calculate, hey, it's okay or not. But only the thing, I think maybe Dr. Gange addresses that. Only thing what I'm kind of seeing is, if you if you sleep at late, like at 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and make sure that you have a gap of some number of hours before, after your food, dinner, right? That's what I think. That's what probably Dr. Gange will address that. What is the ideal time you need to keep it?
I think about 2 to 3 hours.
It's 3 hours.
There you go.
3 hours.
Minimum 3 hours. Yeah.
Okay.
Prior to
Beautiful.
going to bed.
There you go. You know what? Thank you so much, Dr. Amit. We'll come back to the questions, deep dive discussion. And since, Dr. Gange actually showed her presence now. Yeah, Dr. Gange, please, go ahead and then share your screen or share your thoughts, what you would like to, share with our community, this afternoon. Please, thank you.
Sure. Thank you for having me here. And Amit, he covered pretty much all the details that I was going to talk about. So we will talk more about the diabetes and the nutrition. So if you guys let me share my screen about diabetes, let me do that. And then how do I? Can you guys see the slides of this?
Yes, we can see.
Okay.
Perfect.
So the today's discussion is like, I'm focusing on diabetes and how it is diagnosed, who is at risk, and what are the complications of diabetes, and what we need to do to prevent the onset of diabetes or delay the onset of diabetes. So generally, there are two types of diabetes. One is type 1, which is a autoimmune disorder. It is a genetically prone, and it is the incidence of type 1 diabetes is low. It's less than 10% of the people has type 1 diabetes. It's also called insulin dependent diabetes. We used to see that mostly in children getting diagnosed with type 1 very early on in their life. But now, because of the environmental changes, we do see the new onset of type 1 in the older population too. So today's focus is going to be on type 2 diabetes. So basically, diabetes is like changes in the blood sugars. When there is an imbalance between your body's ability to produce insulin versus the amount of sugar, and when the blood sugar rises, we call it as a diabetes. But the glucose or the sugar is a very important source of nutrition. It is the fuel that our body uses for energy. So people who do like extreme diets, in the long run, it is proven that it is not beneficial. So other diabetes is the diabetes that we see in pregnant women. It's called gestational diabetes. It's also mostly in people who are genetically prone, and because of the hormonal changes during pregnancy, they are at a higher risk for gestational diabetes. We see that a lot in Asian patients. Even though they don't have a prior history of diabetes or pre-diabetes, but with a family history of diabetes, when they get pregnant, we see a lot of gestational diabetes in Indian women. Okay. So how do we diagnose diabetes? So I hear a term quite often in my practice that, I was a borderline diabetic. It's like telling someone that, they are borderline pregnant. So there is no borderline pregnancy. So the same way, there is no borderline diabetes. Either you have it or you don't have it, right? So there are certain numbers that we use as the guidelines to say that, hey, beyond this, you have to be more serious. And certain level, we say, okay, you are okay. So the ranges are, we do a test called A1C. This is a 3-month average for blood sugars on the red blood cells. So if the A1C is greater than 6.5, as per the ADA guidelines, it's called diabetes. If the A1C is between 5.7 to 6.4, it's called pre-diabetes. And if they are below 5.7, they don't have diabetes or pre-diabetes. And other way to diagnose the diabetes is if your fasting blood sugars are greater than 126, it's considered diabetes. If it's between 110 to 125, it is considered a pre-diabetes. The numbers are changing, and we're believing that the lower, the better approach right now. So fasting, in my opinion, should be less than 90. And I generally aim for that range when I'm treating my patients with diabetes. And another thing is, whenever you eat a high carb meal, or if you do a oral glucose tolerance test, which means you drink a solution that is high in sugar, close to 70 grams of glucose in it. And if you check the blood sugars 2 hours later, if the 2 hours blood sugars are greater than 200, it is considered diabetes. When we have these numbers, we don't need the confirmatory testing. If the numbers are in between, then we do a second test to confirm. Okay. So we talked about the borderline diabetes, which I don't like. It's called the pre-diabetes. That is the A1C between 5.7 to 6.4. And this is the stage where I believe that education really matters, because most of the complications of diabetes develop during the pre-diabetes state. But using the word borderline diabetes or like, slightly high blood sugars, it's falsely reassuring to the patients. So most of the times people go see their doctors and say, your sugars were a little bit off, watch what you eat, come back in a year. That really doesn't work, because those people in that abnormal range, but not yet diabetic, 60% of them develop the eye complications during the pre-diabetic state, and 44% of them start the leakage of protein in the urine, which means the early signs of kidney damage during that pre-diabetes state. Also, they have a higher risk for high triglycerides. We call it as a metabolic syndrome. So this is the population that represents the tip of an iceberg, because we say that 10% of the US population has type 2 diabetes. That is people who are already diagnosed. But there is close to 25 to 30% more who have abnormal blood sugars, but they are not diabetic yet, but they are at high risk for developing complications. I think targeting that population and educating them more about the lifestyle changes, what are the things that they need to do to prevent complications, will help them a lot. So the pre-diabetes is, as I said, A1C is between 5.7 to 6.4. Fasting blood glucose is between 100 to 125. And the oral glucose tolerance test, when we do it, if it's between 140 to 199, they come under the pre-diabetic zone. Okay. So what are the symptoms of diabetes? I should say that diabetes is a silent killer. It affects everything from head to toe, from your brain, eyes, throat, heart, GI tract, everything, skin, neurological system, your bones, your nails, everything. So, but unless your sugars are very high, or like in 300-400 range, or if the blood sugars are less than 60, people don't experience any symptoms. When the sugars are very high, that's when people come in and they say, okay, I'm more tired than usual, or I'm being more thirsty, and they are hungry constantly, and they can eat a lot of food. But one of the pathologic things with the diabetes is they process the food very fast. Like, if you look at the people with the diabetes compared to people without diabetes, the sensation of fullness, or it's called satiety, is very less in people with the diabetes. So they can eat a lot more. But one of the pathologic thing is enhanced gastric emptying. That means when we eat food, stomach should take certain amount of time to process the food and digest it and to move it down further down. But in diabetics, they process the food much faster. That's why they eat more and they don't get the sensation of fullness, and then they're hungry again in a couple of hours. So that's called enhanced gastric emptying. That's why they are hungry all the time. And then when the blood sugars are very high for a longer period of time, we start noticing changes in their weight. So unexplained weight loss in someone who is not really trying to lose weight, and if they lost certain amount of weight, maybe their blood sugars are high. And we don't see that much in this country, but in India, one of the common things that we noticed was people get cuts or like, wounds, like they step on a nail and the wound doesn't heal. That's when we find out, oh, he has diabetes because the wound is not healing, a delayed wound healing. That is one of the things. And also having a pain in their feet, tingling, numbness, burning sensation. The most common thing people complain is they feel like the ants are crawling under their skin. So it's not a pleasant sensation. It's one of the complications of diabetes because of the neurological damage from high blood sugars. So in women, we also notice a lot of vaginal yeast infections, and in men, urinary tract infections that sometimes can be the presenting sign for diabetes. Because there are no other signs and their blood sugars reach a certain threshold, they start leaking glucose in the urine that makes them at a high risk for yeast infections. And if the blood sugars constantly stay above 250, they start having a swelling behind the eye. So they tend to have blurred vision, especially at night time when they are driving, when they see the traffic lights, they can see that, it looks like a rainbow or a kaleidoscope. It's another indication that their sugars are running high. So now let's look at who is at higher risk for developing diabetes. First and the foremost thing is your weight. If you are overweight, then it puts you automatically at a higher risk for developing diabetes. So if you look at the statistics of diabetics, 90% of them are overweight or obese. So the obesity is if the body mass index is greater than 30, we call it as obese. If the BMI is greater than 28, they are overweight. That is for Caucasians in general. But being Indians, we are Southeast Asians, we are at a very high risk for developing cardiovascular disease. So our BMI requirements are a little different. So if the BMI is greater than 23, 23 is considered overweight. So normal BMI for Southeast Asians is BMI of 23 or less. So BMI of 23 to 25 is considered overweight. And if the BMI is greater than 25, it's considered obese. So we have a different set of guidelines because we are genetically prone for more cardiovascular disease. So, and the second thing is if you have family history of diabetes, that automatically puts you at a higher risk for developing diabetes. And if you are from other ethnic populations like African Americans, Pacific Islanders, or Hispanic or Latino population, they are at a higher risk. And if you are a woman, had a gestational diabetes during pregnancy and delivered the baby who weighed more than 9 pounds, that baby is at a high risk for developing diabetes when they become adults. And also if somebody has higher blood pressure, that automatically puts them at a higher risk for diabetes, because generally most people who has a high blood pressure or tend to be overweight or obese. And in Southeast Asians, another lipid panel that makes them at a higher risk for diabetes is the pattern that we see when we check their cholesterol is they tend to have very low good cholesterol. So the good cholesterol or HDL tend to be very low and they tend to have a higher triglycerides. So if you look at the cholesterol profile of Southeast Asians, the total may be okay or actually in the normal zone, that is less than 200. Triglycerides tend to be high, that means greater than 150. HDL very low. I have even seen an HDL of 2 recently, and it's supposed to be greater than 40. And LDL, generally you see a normal LDL. So in Southeast Asians, our cholesterol profile genetically is slightly different than Caucasians or other ethnic groups, because those people tend to have a higher LDL. So there are not many studies done in looking at the cardiovascular risk in people with a normal LDL, but a higher triglycerides or low HDL. That is why all these now, the research focus is on looking at ethnic groups that are at a high risk for developing cardiovascular disease, because it's not like one size fits all. Our genetic makeup is different compared to other ethnic groups. And also if somebody has been using steroids like a prednisone, like for example, if somebody has asthma or lung disease and they get a breathing problems, the first thing they get was the steroids to improve their breathing. If somebody is on steroids for long term, those people are at high risk for developing diabetes. And another rare but can happen is if somebody has a high triglycerides can cause a pancreatitis. Pancreas is the organ that produces insulin. So those people, if they have repeated attacks of inflammation of the pancreas, they develop diabetes because pancreas is not able to produce enough insulin. Okay. So this is the complications of diabetes. So if you look at the people that are in the emergency room with the chest pain, so close to 90% of them have diabetes. And if you look at the death rate, it is very high in people with a type 2 diabetes. So heart disease or coronary artery disease or heart failure was noted more than 65% of the time in people with a type 2 diabetes. And stroke was seen in about 15 to 20% of the time. So there are two things here. So diabetes increases your risk for developing heart disease and stroke. And if you have, if you get a heart attack, and if you have diabetes, the risk of dying or other complications is 2 to 4 times higher compared to people without diabetes. And it's also the leading cause of kidney failure. We've seen that in 44% of the time with type 2 diabetes. So, and the kidney disease is another major heart risk factor. So if you look at people who are on dialysis, and if you look at their mortality, 90+% of them will die from heart disease or heart failure. And also because type 2 diabetes increases your thickness of your blood. So that means it reduces the blood flow in the vessels. So they are at a higher risk for lower limb amputations. The way I like to explain to my patients is like, if you take 2 glasses of water and you put sugar in 1 glass and you melt the sugar in that plain water and try to dip your finger. And if you dip the finger in the glass that has sugar in it, it is very sticky, right? That's the same way your blood will become very sticky and sludgy, so it cannot move freely when you have diabetes. And also the diabetes is the leading cause of blindness in people with type 2 diabetes, especially ages between 30 to 75. And the most common things that we see are the routine stuff that we hear, like, carpal tunnel syndrome, or frozen shoulders, or like plantar fasciitis. So these are the, like, daily nuisances with type 2 diabetes. Like people who work with their computers a lot, and if they have type 2 diabetes, they have a higher risk of developing carpal tunnel syndrome, where their fingers get numb, they start having burning sensation. And also the frozen shoulder is very common with the type 2 diabetes, because the capsule where the shoulder bone sits becomes too stiff and makes it hard to mobilize the joint. So people will have a hard time lifting their hand above their shoulders. And the plantar fasciitis is the inflammation of the feet, which is also because of the metabolic complications of diabetes. Okay, so this is the pregnancy thing. If a young woman who has type 2 diabetes or diabetes and gets pregnant, if the blood sugars are not under control at the time of conception or during the pregnancy, the chances of retaining the pregnancy are very low. And the higher blood sugars in the mom lead to the neurological problems in the baby. So people can develop spinal cord issues. Also, the worst case I have seen during my training was baby was born without brain. So there was absolutely no neurological development. So it's a serious issue, especially in young women who are prone for diabetes or who are like a pre-diabetic at the time of pregnancy. They need to be much more cautious in terms of managing their diabetes. Okay. And also in men, sexual dysfunction is one of the complications of type 2 diabetes. And excessive, dryness, skin ulcers, skin problems, acne. Those are all the other skin issues that we see. Eczema is more common with type 2 diabetes. So another thing is the mental health issues that we see. Are you guys able to hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So the depression is also very common. So it's like, chicken or the egg thing. When people who has a history with high blood sugars, they tend to be less happy or more prone for sadness or depression. And then when they are feeling sad or low, thinking that their life is not worth, or not able to do things that they want to do, or less motivated, their diabetes gets worse. So it's like a cyclical thing. So when I was in training, my professor used to say, just go into the waiting room and see who's blood sugars are well controlled just looking at their faces. It was like a fun experiment to see. And it is so true that, more than 60% of the diabetics suffer from depression. So it's a serious issue. So it's not just the diabetes and its complications, but when people have diabetes, when they acquire other illnesses, other even simple things like flu, upper respiratory tract infections, or like stomach flu, or like food poisoning, they tend to get more sick because of their underlying diabetes. So just a few minutes ago, I gave you an example of sugar water versus regular water. The same concept applies here too. So if you drop a few pieces of candy in your backyard and wait for a few minutes, you see all the ants and bugs crawl to that candy, right? Or the sugar. That's the same way when you have diabetes, you attract all kinds of infections. That's why it's very important to keep the sugars under normal zone. So now we have seen that what diabetes can do and how we diagnose it and who is at risk. Now, let's see what we need to do to prevent the diabetes and to prevent the complications of diabetes. So the way, like, when you want to buy a home, right? So what are the things that you look at? It's always the location, location, and location. So the same way for diabetes, the treatment is diet, 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 and diet. Then comes the exercise and then the medication. If you don't follow the first 5 things, the medications are not going to be of much use. So the nutrition plays a major role in the management of diabetes. So if somebody is overweight, if their BMI is about 25 in Southeast Asians, and if they are Caucasians or African Americans, if their BMI is greater than 28, if they lose at least 5% of their total body weight, it's actually not much in terms of the pounds. If you see, it's maybe about 8 to 12 pounds on an average. If somebody weighs about 180 pounds, they can lower their blood sugar or risk development of diabetes by more than 15%. And it also improves their blood pressure as well as the cholesterol. So the exercise recommendations Dr. Amit mentioned earlier is like, if you can exercise every day, that is great. But the current guidelines is 150 minutes a week. That is 30 minutes, 5 times a week. You can split that 30 minutes into 3 times, like 3 10-minute breaks. 10 minutes, if you look at the time, it's not much. While you are watching Deal or No Deal or American Idol, during the commercial breaks, you can just get up and walk around your sofa. You don't need to go to the gyms. You don't need a fancy equipment to exercise. Anytime we move, we are making a lot of changes internally in our body. It lowers the stress hormone levels. It's called the cortisol. It helps the body to utilize its own insulin, because the main defect in type 2 diabetes is not insulin production. It is insulin resistance. Body makes insulin, but it doesn't go into the cells. So that insulin resistance gets better with exercise. So 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week, you can split the 30 minutes in multiple segments, and there is no right time to exercise. If you can exercise in the morning, that's great. That way you can get it over with for the day. Or if you don't have time in the morning, you can exercise at night, whatever. But getting that 30 minutes a day of physical activity where your heartbeat is 1.5 times the baseline is important. So a lot of times people say that, they stand at their work, they walk around a lot at their work. Is that enough? No, it is not. You want to see your heart pumping, right? A little bit more than the baseline. That is considered exercise. It's definitely better than sitting on a couch and watching television. But if you want to get the benefits of exercise, your heartbeat has to be more than baseline. So maintaining an ideal body weight is important to prevent the diabetes. So it's all, again, goes back to lifestyle changes and exercise, conscious eating, avoiding processed foods. So if you look at the caloric intake, a lot of times people say that the calories in versus calories out is what important, but not all calories are the same. Okay, you can buy a bag of potato chips, it says 150 calories, and you can eat an apple, which is like 150 calories. So they are not the same. How your body responds to processing that food is different. So 150 calories of chips has a lot of salt in it, lot of fat, especially saturated fat because it is deep fried, and also additives, lot of additional stuff to make the food stays fresher longer at the shelves. So those additives are carcinogenic. Carcinogenic means they make you cancer prone. So idea is to eat our own foods, native foods that we grew up with, and make modifications. So if you look at the Indian food, the traditional Indian food, it's really a very good diet. We don't have much fried foods. We don't have much like meat involved on a day-to-day eating. And it, let me rephrase it. Indian food is not butter chicken or paneer butter masala, okay? The traditional Indian food, if you look at it, it is like stir-fried vegetables and a small portion of rice or rotis and dal. Dal is the protein. So if you look at the population that is more than 40% vegetarian, the lentils or the pulses are the source of protein. So if you look at the traditional Indian plate in villages, it's what the ADA recommends. It's what American College of Cardiology recommends. Stir-fried vegetables occupying half of your plate. 1/4 of it is the rice or the roti or whatever the other grains. And 1/4 of it is the lentils or the paneer. So, but now we changed, with the modernization, westernization, the food is changing. But if we stick to our native foods, that really helps to maintain a lifestyle where we can maintain the diet. The reason why I say that is when I tell my patients, you have to lose weight, you have to follow certain diet, they tend to make drastic changes to what they eat. And that's not going to be sustainable in the long run. And also limiting the intake of sugar, beverages, even the juices. Okay. So Dr. Amit talked about ABCDs of lifestyle management. This is the same concept for diabetes too. A stands for A1C. A1C has to be less than 7%. B stands for blood pressure. It's 130/80 or less. C for cholesterol. Total cholesterol less than 200. Triglycerides less than 150. Good cholesterol greater than 40. And LDL less than 100. And D in the end is the medications. Okay. So also, once you have pre-diabetes or diabetes, there are certain things you need to do to prevent complications. One of them is getting your eyes checked once a year, getting your urine checked for protein leakage. As I mentioned earlier, these complications starts in a pre-diabetic state. And also watching your feet to make sure there are no cuts and nicks and make sure the sensation is still intact. Getting a flu vaccine every year and getting a pneumonia vaccine. It's actually 2 doses. It's now every 5 years. And seeing a dentist a couple of times a year because dental issues, infections are very common in diabetics and people who are prone for diabetes. So if we go by the current estimates, by 2050, there will be 1 in 3 people with a type 2 diabetes in US. So the most important important thing for prevention is knowledge, learning about diabetes, learning about how we can prevent it, looking at our own risk factors and see how we can modify them. And also the very important thing, especially in Southeast Asians, the way I see is health is not the priority. People come in and say they are very busy, they have work, they cannot come for appointments, and they don't have time to do this. But health is the most precious asset one can possess. So please take care of that. And it's always an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. With that, I conclude. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Any questions, or we want to move on to the
Very
next?
good, Dr. Gangi. Very good information. A lot of information, actually. Dr. Amit actually shared a good amount, and then back to back in one more episode of really good information. But thank you so much for that. Here is the thing, before we actually really deep dive into the questions and answers from all the, we have a lot of questions already received from people who are not able to make it, and for those who are actually watching us live on YouTube. But we're going to go through that. Just a couple of questions, Dr. Gangi, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I know you mentioned, all these details and how you take care and how you actually manage it, all the stuff, right? But here is the kind of a one question, like a rapid question. Is this diabetes preventable?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect.
Maintaining a healthy lifestyle is the key to prevent diabetes. And the stress, a lot of times people get diagnosed with the diabetes under stressful conditions. Like if they lost their job or lost a loved one in the family, or if they get sickness, like from infections, where it is so much stress to the body to fight the infection, that's when we notice them, their blood sugars are going high. And also when people get hospitalized with a heart attack, they don't know that they have diabetes, but their sugars are higher. That's because the heart attack is very stressful to the body. Then the sugar starts going high.
Okay, beautiful. I like to hear that, because if you would have said something else, that's different, right? You said diabetes is preventable. And this
Yes,
is
it is.
very, very, very important for our community. I mean, for all of us. If there is something that, hey, you know what, you cannot help, you got to go through this thing, what can you do, right? But this one is preventable. So
It
that
is.
means the responsibility on us to take care of our own body. And that's what I wanted to actually, get through this message to our community. The one more question, Dr. Gangi. I know you mentioned family history, right, of diabetes, right? Now, the question again, if someone have had a family history of diabetes, for that person, is diabetes preventable?
It is. I would
Okay,
like to say it's
beautiful.
postponable than preventable, but yes, with the lifestyle changes, we can postpone it.
Okay, love it, love to hear that. Because there are so many myths and so much of information going through the so-called social media. They say, if you have a family background of diabetes, well, eventually you're going to have it. Well, I mean, that's what I really wanted to kind of make a point here with your words, Dr. Gangi. And the other question is, I know these are all kind of rapid style, right? Let's say if someone, I really like that you said there is no such state called the pre-diabetes, but we all hear, when you go to a doctor or someone, oh, you are in a pre-diabetic,
No,
okay, what now?
It's a small correction here. There is a word pre-diabetes, but there is no borderline diabetes.
Right. Okay, now here is the question for you. Okay, if someone is actually going to go through diabetes, like they got in, and then a pre-diabetic condition or whatever it is it actually curable? I mean, subjected to all the treatments, following all the exercise and everything, subjected to following everything, is it really curable once you get into diabetes?
Yes. We've seen
Wow.
people just with the dietary changes and adding exercise, their pre-diabetes state goes back to the normal. So, and they can maintain it for many years unless their dietary habits changes.
Wow. Okay. You're putting more responsibility on us.
And
We're
also,
an impression that,
yeah.
So,
Also, Chiniti, about diabetes and so-called curing diabetes, just losing weight with diet and exercise, especially diet, as Dr. Gangi mentioned, the top 5 things are diet. If you lose weight, decrease your BMI, bring it down to normal BMI, especially for South Asians, less than 23, or 23 or less than 23. that can correct diabetes. I wouldn't say cure, but correct diabetes. It'll preclude the need for medications.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, with lifestyle modification, you can, yeah.
That's
I'd like to
beautiful.
also make a comment. You know, Dr. Guttigoli spoke about alcohol consumption for people who drink socially. I probably tend to be more restrictive on my patients. I say, if you drink socially, make it once a week. Because when you tell a patient to drink 1 glass, they may drink 3. So I really try to limit it on people. Say if it's a Super Bowl, birthday, New Year's, daily drinking I do not recommend, not from a health standpoint, but even socially, I think it's too much. There are a lot of empty calories. The simple sugars are in alcohol, and people don't just stop with one, even if it's considered moderate. And the cardiac effects can be quite deleterious. We cannot predict who, but there are people who drink a little more than moderate just on weekends, and over 2-3 decades, they develop an entity known as a weak heart, or what we call cardiomyopathy, and that leads to heart failure. So, and also when a patient speaks to the physician that they only drink a little bit, we have a saying in medicine, multiplied by 3, because they want to look good in front of the doctor. So I just ramp it down and just say, you don't need to drink to live. I just say, just do it on New Year's or your birthday, and that's it.
There you go.
Very
That's
limited
awesome,
to special occasions.
That's very good point, Dr. Ravi. I mean, that's very important, very that thing. You know what? I have a lot of questions actually, but before that, actually, we jump into the QAs. Let's actually see. I know this is a plain language. I'm not a medical professional, as it says, but in our plain language, what we think or what we say is CPR is a first aid to heart attack. So that saves a lot of lives, and luckily, along with Dr. Amit and Dr. Ravi and Dr. Gangi, we also have a CPR professional along with us. So let's actually see what is all the CPR about, and see what we have. We have, I always kind of messed up, the designation of, I think, yeah, this is a Kishore Chukala is with us. He is, what is that? Therapist, some therapist. I think he's going to share with us the name. He's been actually doing, respiratory therapist. Yeah. He's been a respiratory therapist for over 20 years, and he's been actually helping educating our communities for so many years, and he performed CPR on real humans at the hospitals on a regular basis. And actually, before COVID, we did a lot of sessions, in-person sessions in Texas, Dallas area. But now, because of this, we wanted to take this as a global educational seminar webinars. So we requested, Kishore to actually share how he's going to demonstrate, how he's going to explain about CPR, how it is actually a first aid to heart attacks, as well as how you can actually do to save a life. Kishore, if you are there, please, share your experience, your insight about it. And then, of course, we have our, cardiologists and, Dr. Gangi, endocrinologist, also with us. If there are any kind of a clarifications or questions on top of what you're going to share, and, rest assured, please go ahead and then, share your thoughts, Kishore.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chinni Garu. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So, what Chinni Garu mentioned, I'm a respiratory therapist. I've been a respiratory therapist for over 25 years. I know we covered a lot of, the physicians covered a lot of information about heart disease, how we can prevent it, things like that. That's excellent information. However, in reality, there are a lot of people dying from cardiac arrest. So just to I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides that I want to share to show. Let me speak for that in a minute, and then I'll see if I can share it. So what we're talking about today is specifically for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. So the CPR instruction that I'm providing is called hands-only CPR. And this has been being promoted by American Heart Association for many years now. Specifically, again, I'm going to repeat it. It's only for out-of-hospital setting. This hands-only CPR does not pertain to inside the hospital setting. It's only for outside hospital setting for non-healthcare workers. So people who don't have any knowledge about, or who are not experts in healthcare. So as the physicians mentioned, a cardiac disease is a leading cause of death in the world. And just to give you some numbers, over 300,000 people die from cardiac arrest outside the hospital setting. I'm not talking about in the hospital. This is exclusively outside the hospital, in homes, in shopping malls, in restaurants, in parks, in movie theaters, all those places. Over 300,000 people die from cardiac arrest because timely CPR was not available or not provided, or people did not know what to do. So statistics show that 50% of those, about 50% of those deaths could have been prevented if timely CPR was administered. Again, like the physicians mentioned, heart attack itself doesn't kill people, but cardiac arrest is what kills people. Heart attack can, in most cases, lead to cardiac arrest, but people die from a cardiac arrest. Performing CPR, hands-only CPR, is actually very easy, and it's. I'm going to show you. So one of the most important things that you want to do before you start CPR is make sure the person who you are attempting to do CPR on is unconscious, is not responsive it's not responding. So can you all see the mannequin?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you establish unresponsiveness? So if you come across a person who is lying on the floor, just not moving, the way to establish unresponsiveness is to tap on their shoulders, not gently but hard. Say, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" So if they don't respond, then it calls for intervention. The very first step to do after, if they don't respond, is to call 911. Okay, and here's why that's very important. It's one of the critical steps. If you do not call 911, the EMS emergency services will not come. Basically, nobody knows that there is an health care emergency. So the very first thing to do is to call 911. If you're alone, you call 911 first, and then you start the CPR. If you're in a public setting, like a shopping mall, restaurant, you assign that task to one specific person to call 911. What I mean by that is when somebody is lying on the floor, there's a lot of people who are like onlookers, who are looking at what's happening. So you look at one person in the eye and you say, "You call 911 and tell them there's a cardiac arrest at this location." And the reason for that is, if you're doing the CPR and you say, "Somebody call 911," is there somebody in the audience? There is nobody with the name of somebody. So everybody is looking at somebody else and nobody ends up calling 911. Okay, so you point out to one specific person and you say, "You call 911," and you tell them there's a cardiac arrest. So you have already established unresponsiveness. You have call 911. And one more step before you start the hands-only CPR is to you put your cheek next to the patient's airway in the mouth, and you feel if there's any air coming, if they're breathing, and also you're looking if the chest is rising. If they're breathing and the chest is rising, then that means that they're still alive. The cardiac arrest has not happened. So then you take other, and then the next steps as to try to wake them up, things like that. But if you don't feel any air movement, the chest is not rising, then you start CPR. And it's very, very easy. Push hard and fast on the chest, okay? So make sure you remove the shirt. It doesn't matter, man, woman, it doesn't matter. You need to be able to see, especially if they're wearing layers of clothes or a heavy coat or something like that. You want to make sure you remove the clothes. And where do you put your hands? You look at the nipples, draw an imaginary line across the nipples from one end to the other. And in the middle, that's where you put the heel, only the heel of one hand. Okay, you can also feel on yourself. There's something called the breastbone or the sternum. That is where the heel of the hand should be. All right, and then you put the heel of one hand, you take the other hand, you hold the heel up and you sit up straight. Your elbows have to be straight. Your shoulder has to be directly above the patient, like this. Your shoulders, your hands should be completely straight. The shoulders should be straight. You should be directly above the person. That'll give you the maximum amount of pressure you can generate. All right. Then what you do is basically push hard and fast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So just keep pushing on the heart. So when you're pushing on the heart, what you're doing is you're pumping the blood. So the heart pumps the blood to the rest of the body. So when you're pushing on the heart, you're actually pumping the blood. That will keep the oxygen flowing. Whatever oxygen is remaining in the blood, it'll keep it flowing to the rest of the body, especially the brain and the liver and the important organs. And it'll keep the person, or it'll basically prolong the life. So how long do you keep compressing on the chest? As long as it takes. And that's where the 911 call comes into play. If you did not call 911, then you will be here sitting and doing CPR for a very long time and you're going to get tired. Okay, so the first important step is to call 911, and then you do your assessment and you do your compressions only. This is hands only CPR. There is no mouth to mouth. There is no breathing, nothing. And the reason why American Heart Association came up with this hands only CPR is because a lot of people were afraid to put their mouth on the patient's mouth and breathe, because we don't know what kind of communicable diseases they may have. So hands-only CPR, they did a lot of research on this, even without doing the mouth-to-mouth breathing. This hands-only CPR can sustain life until EMS services arrives. All right, so it's, again, very simple. Check for responsiveness. If they're not responding, call 911, check for the breathing, make sure they're not breathing, and then you do the CPR. Push hard and fast in the middle of the chest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, and then while you're doing this, obviously you may get tired from doing, a person cannot keep doing this for a long time. If you get tired, you recruit somebody from the people who are watching and say, hey, come here, come help me, I need some help. And tell them, teach them how to do it. Again, it is very, very easy, very simple, and it can save a life. Like I mentioned, 300,000 people die from cardiac arrest outside the hospital setting. And the next thing is the automated external defibrillators. We've all seen this. They're little boxes that are hanging on the walls. Restaurants have them, airports have them, sports complexes, movie theaters have them. So these are also very friendly, very user-friendly, easy to use. What I have, this is a demonstration version only. This is not for real use, but you can Google them, find the pictures of it. And one thing I want to challenge everybody: if you're working in a non-healthcare setting, tomorrow when you go to your work, see if you can find where they have the AED in your office. Research has shown 50% of the people do not know where the AED is located in their workplace. So make sure you find it, make sure you know where it is, make sure you know how to get to it in an emergency. Okay, that is very important to know because employers are providing AEDs, companies are providing it, but if you don't know where it is, you can't use it. All right. So how to use an AED? If you can follow directions, you can use an AED. That's as simple as it gets. You will open it from the package, and some of the AEDs will turn on as soon as you open them. Other ones, you have to push the big green button that says on it. So you turn it on. So it said applied pads. So in every AED, you have two sets of pads. You have adult pads, pediatric pads. Pediatric pads are children 1 year old or less. Okay. So if it's an adult, if it's over 1 year old, you can use an adult pad. If there is a child and there is no pediatric pad in the package, don't worry, you can use the adult pad. Okay. On the pad itself, you don't have to know, you don't have to be an expert. It tells you where to put it. Okay. If you look at it, this pad, there's an arrow. It says it goes up here on the top. This pad, there's an arrow, it goes on the side right here. Okay. So you connect the pads. So it'll say it is analyzing. Just follow the instructions. This one is saying analyzing. And I don't know if you heard it. It said shock advised, and it is charging. So it will tell you if the shock is needed or not. If the shock is needed, it will say deliver shock, and it will. And if you can see, this button is flashing. So we have to push that button to deliver a shock. And one of the important things, one of the most important thing to remember, while shock is being delivered, do not touch the patient. So you have to stay clear. And the device will give you enough warning. It'll say shock advised, stay clear. So you want to make sure everybody is clear, because if you're touching the patient, you can be shocked as well. Okay. Again, I know I'm going through this very quickly, but this is very, very easy to use. Just open the package, follow the directions, and you'll be fine. It's not rocket science. This is designed for non-healthcare professionals. So you don't have to be an expert in knowing you don't have to be a physician or a nurse or a respiratory therapist like me. It's very easy. And one last thing I want to share before we leave, before I sign off. So this is a CPR learning kit. It is available in 99% of the fire stations for free. There's no charge. Just go to your local fire station, ask them for a CPR learning kit. They will give you this. This is provided by the American Heart Association, and it has It has a DVD. It tells you how to, teaches you how to do CPR. It also has a mannequin where you can practice CPR. Okay. Okay. This is available in 99% of the fire stations in the United States, and it is absolutely free. There's no charge. Just go by there. You can get the kit, watch the DVD, and you can learn how to do CPR. That's all I have. Again, this is a very quick demonstration, but I'm happy. Like Chinigaru said, we did a lot of community events. I'm happy to come out either to your workplace, to your HOA, to your temple, church, wherever it is. I'm happy to come and teach this free class to anybody at any time.
Love it, Kishore. Thank you so much. This is pretty good. I know, yeah. I mean, you in person, you go, a little bit, more, duration, the more kind of a explanation. But this is awesome. We love it. We love the setting. Actually, we love your idea. Kind of a showing on the floor, actual stuff, but we could clearly see it. Very nice, very nice. Thank you so much for sharing that up. So to save lives, but you know what? I actually learned a little bit here too. I mean, every day I'll learn, and every, so as you say, me personally, I thought everything is heart attack. Cardiac, no, nothing. But you kind of mentioned a differentiated between heart attack and cardiac arrest, right? So if you or docs can actually share with us, what is it actually happening or happened at that step? That kind of incident, what, Kishore mentioned, what is actually cardiac arrest? What actually really happened?
All right. So this is Amit Guttigoli, Dr. Guttigoli. So yeah, so this is exactly what I do. I'm actually a electrician of the heart. So what happens is when Kishore Garu was alluding to cardiac arrest, okay? Cardiac arrest, as I mentioned in my earlier slide, what it is it's an electrical problem. So usually we have the rhythm of our heart. There's something called as PQRST, which is the normal rhythm of our heart. And it's a very organized way that the pulse that keeps us alive starts from the top up part of our heart and goes down, and what we call activates the rest of the heart. And then it regenerates or repolarizes, and then it does it all over again. It does it every minute about 50 to 90 times a minute. That's the heartbeat, right? That's the pulse rate, right? So when that becomes chaotic, or that becomes disorganized, then it just becomes like a chaotic activation of the heart, and the heart no longer becomes a effective pump. So this organized rhythm of the heart makes sure that the heart is contracting in an organized manner like this, right? But then when it goes to a rhythm called as ventricular fibrillation, or disorganized rhythm of the lower chambers of the heart, then the heart starts doing like this. So it's no longer an effective pump. So that means the blood is not being pumped outside. That means there's decreased blood supply to the heart, to the brain and rest of the body. And that's when when they pass out. Okay. So once they pass out, the most sensitive organs of the body are the brain, and then the rest. The other organs actually are quite resistant to long periods of decreased blood supply and low oxygen, but the brain is very sensitive. And that's why we need to initiate CPR right away, as soon as possible. That's why when Kishore said you have to apply those pumps of pump the chest, it is so that the heart, which is doing like this, you're helping the heart from outside to make it into an effective pump again as much as possible. Right?
Got it.
The other thing is when he talked about the AEDs, and that's very important. So the AED is a very simple thing to operate. Okay. All you have to do is apply the pads as per instruction, and then connect it. It will be connected to the AED, and then it'll give you instructions. It will sense the rhythm. So the AED itself, it has algorithms where it will sense the rhythm. It will tell you that this is a shockable rhythm. That means that this is ventricular fibrillation, and it will tell you, go ahead and shock. If it's not a shock, now ventricular fibrillation is one of the reasons why a person can have a cardiac arrest, right? So if it's a shockable rhythm, then it'll shock it. Then you're resetting the rhythm of the heart. You're bringing it back to normal. That's what we do. Okay, in the hospital, to when a person going into cardiac arrest and he's in one of those rhythms, we shock them. Now, there are other rhythms that can also cause you to pass out and have cardiac arrest, which is the slow rhythm. In that, the heart, instead of contracting 60 to 90 beats per minute, okay, it just stops, or it's going like slowly. It's happening only a few beats per minute. Even that's an ineffective pump. That's why you do the CPR to reverse that, right? Until you do something to increase the rate. And that something can be either given medicines called atropine, or take him to the ER. Of course, you will call EMS and take the person to the ER, or have them evaluate the patient.
Okay, beautiful. I mean, that's good. Good to I know and learn the difference between the heart attack versus cardiac arrest. That's a good explanation, Dr. Amit. Now the thing is, for Kishore, Kishore, you mentioned, right? Okay, about 10 times, to do that repeatedly, in the in between the chest, the collarbone. You said, what is that bone you said?
And the sternum.
Yeah, sternum, right? Yeah. So, if you got to do it hard, right? Is it if you do hard, is there a chance of kind of you breaking the bones, or how do we? Because how do we actually measure how much pressure you should really put in? It's so scary, right? At that time of the
That is correct. So if you're pushing too hard, so the sternum, the breastbone is actually very, very strong. Most of the time, ribs get broken when your ribs are on the sides. So the sternum is right in the middle. The ribs are on the sides. The rib cage actually protects the heart and the lungs. So you can, there's a possibility to break the ribs. However, even if a rib is broken, you still want to continue CPR. You don't stop CPR, because what is if a rib is broken, what's more important at the time? Keeping the person alive, or not, preventing further rib fractures. So one thing to do is, that's why I said you draw an imaginary line across the nipples. That's the reason why you won't be able to see the bare chest of the person. Because on top of the clothes, you may not be able to see, that your hands can slip, all those things can happen. So you want to unclothe them, draw an imaginary line across the nipples, and right in the middle, you can feel the very hard structure. And all of you, if you put your fingers in the middle, you can feel a hard structure. And also, it's important to use the heel of one hand, not the whole hand. If you use the heel, it compresses only on the sternum, so the chances of a rib fracture are less. But yes, rib fractures do happen, but you just reposition your hand and then keep going.
You know what, Kishore? Yeah, as you explained, I now I remember you when you explained, multiple times in our in-person sessions before COVID. Yes, you're right. Yeah, I remember now. But it's for the sake of all the whole community, right? Yeah, thank you so much for helping. But you know what, Kishore, the one that you shared is amazing. I didn't even know that there is a device, or the AED device, that you can get it for free, no cost at pretty much all the fire stations in the United States.
Let me rephrase. The AED is not free.
What is that device? It's actually. Please explain us a little bit. Yeah.
This is a CPR learning kit. This is free. Yeah, the AED is not free. So in this kit, this kit does not have an AED. It has a DVD that teaches you how to do CPR. So the AED is not free. The AED costs anywhere from $200 to $1,000, depending upon the brand and bells and whistles and things like that. So the AEDs, there's no reason for each individual person to go buy an AED. You're not going to need that.
I know. Yeah. I saw there's a question that one of our attendees are actually asking it. How expensive is it to get AED device? Right. Okay. But yeah, we got that. So pretty much you will leverage in the public places, or with your where you work, the employment, or places, or temples, or maybe common public places that you should be able to see or figure that, right? Okay, great. Thank you so much. This is awesome. Love it. And now let's actually quickly go into the Q&A mode. here. We got a lot of questions, and we're going to go cross our time, but definitely if all the physicians don't mind actually sparing a couple more minutes with us, we're going to go with questions, at a random style and then at a random order. There is no such order. Let's hear it. So now, let me actually see here. Okay, Dr. Gangi, I mean, you mentioned that, okay, this is curable. It's actually pretty good to see in terms of, the medical advancements, but it's on us that, okay, if it is curable, that's all up to you, whether you wanted to actually make it happen or not, right? But here is the question for you, that Dr. Gangi, so the people who are actually taking insulin, what are the chances for them actually get out of the insulin, or once they get into insulin mode, is it that something that they have to kind of continue in their lifetime?
Okay. So it depends on how long they have diabetes. So diabetes is a progressive disease. That means once they are diagnosed, initially we can control it with diet and exercise, and we can maintain the blood sugars without medications. And then if things changes, if the blood sugar starts going high, they may need medication. So after 10 years or so, 10 to 15 years on an average, more than half of the type 2 diabetics tend to be insulinopenic. That means their body doesn't produce enough insulin. So if they are at that later stage of diabetes and on insulin, probably they won't be able to come off of it. They can cut down the doses and take a lesser amount or minimize the frequency of insulin intake depending on what they eat, but coming off of completely may not be possible. On the other hand, who has diabetes maybe less than 10 years, they haven't been following any diet, and suddenly they decide to take a charge of their disease and watch what they eat and focusing on that, those population can come off of the insulin.
Got it. Okay. That makes more clarity on that. Some people actually have that understanding or concern that, oh no, I don't want to go through insulin because I cannot get out of the insulin. So there is so much of going on, right? Now, looking at that, Dr. Amit, we're in the kind of more of a lot of advancements even in the space of medical, space. Are there any smart devices that helps us to kind of give us some kind of a alarm that for all these heart diseases or whatever that we are all talking about in the world of heart diseases?
Right. So when you talk about devices, right, to help, ultimately we're trying to prevent deaths from this, right? We're trying to prolong life.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no device that's going to alarm you about whether you're going to have a heart attack. You have to go by your symptoms, right? Chest pain, shortness of breath, and stuff like that. As far as devices, we have picked up certain high risk people who are at a high risk of having cardiac arrest. Like people who've had a prior heart attack and who have a weak heart, people who've had heart failure, people who have something called as thickening of the heart muscle, a condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and who've passed out. Okay, so these are all high risk people. So in these subset of people who make up a very small percentage of the population, we implant something called as a defibrillator. It's a internal cardioverter defibrillator. Kishore spoke about the AED, which is an external defibrillator. So in the very high risk people, we implant these defibrillators that sit in the chest. We put a wire from the vein underneath the collarbone into the heart, and the other end of the wire we connect to the defibrillator, which is about this big and about this thick. It's a metal can, and we connect the lead to the generator and put it underneath the skin, make a pocket and put it underneath the skin. And this monitors the heart rhythm continuously. And if they ever have one of these dangerous rhythms that is life-threatening, or they could die from that, or they could pass out, it'll either shock them, or it'll do something called as it'll pace them very fast and get them out of it. So this way, it'll prevent them from passing out or dying. But this, again, is only in the high-risk population. For the general community, there's really not anything of that.
Got it. Okay.
Hey, Dr. Amit, I have a question for you about that, the Cardia Mobile from Amazon. is that, that can detect a couple
Sure.
of heart rhythms. Is that something that you would recommend for people who have had diagnosed cardiac disease?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So talking of devices, so there are devices, including your Apple Watch. The Apple Watch that you'll wear, you have an app in there where you click on the app and then you keep your finger on the crown of the watch, and that gives you your rhythm. It tells you the rhythm of what you are. So that's very important in some people who have, like, say, palpitations. Palpitations are, they feel their heart racing, or they feel thumping or skipped beats. So when people have a condition like that, I suggest that they buy an Apple Watch or the CardioMobile device that's available. The CardioMobile app is a little more cumbersome, but something like an Apple Watch, it's very easy to detect your rhythm, and it'll give you simple diagnosis as well. It will tell you whether you're in a sinus rhythm, which is normal sinus rhythm. It will tell you whether you're in atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation is another very common abnormal rhythm from the upper chambers of the heart. So it will tell you, it's able to diagnose that. It is not able to diagnose heart attacks. Okay, just to clarify, it is mainly to diagnose abnormal rhythms of the heart. And of course, if you're going to have a cardiac arrest, you can't be doing all this. It's only on people who have palpitations, right? So who have symptoms of heart racing and stuff like that. For those people, you can use your Apple Watch or your CardioMobile device.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to hear, Dr. Amit. So now, I've got a question from one of our community member from Dubai, and so he's asking, how do I differentiate between the typical chest pain versus heart attack or a gas? All that. Can you just give us some
Sure.
kind of thoughts on it? Yeah.
Yeah. So typically, angina or chest pain due to the heart, or blockages in the blood vessels of the heart, or chest pain due to a heart attack is usually tightness or pressure-like. It's usually a substernal, which means underneath the sternal bone, in the middle of the chest or to the left. It could also be in the left shoulder. It could be in the left arm. It could sometimes, in females especially, they can have a lot of atypical features. They could have jaw pain, back pain, right shoulder pain, and usually the nature of the pain is pressure or tightness. However, it can also come as heartburn, as burning sensation. Typically, it is associated with activity or exercise, right? Whereas heartburn pain usually comes after eating, right? Or when the patient lies down and then he has reflux. Some people have a lot of reflux. So that's when your reflux pain, heartburn comes on. All right. And then typically, if it comes on with activity or exertion, and also associated with other thing is, if it's associated with sweating, diaphoresis, or nausea. Of course, heartburn also can be associated with nausea, but nausea, I feel like you want to throw up, or shortness of breath. Now, those are all, if they're associated symptoms along with the chest pain, then these have to be concerning, and you may want to get medical help.
Okay, got it. That's pretty good information. Now, the other question is Dr. Ravi with us, or?
He had to leave.
Yeah, okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for, please, send us our, the wishes, and thank you for, making his time to be there here. Thank you so much for that. And now the question is, Dr. Gangi, you mentioned that, if someone is actually going through with this gestational diabetes during the pregnancy, it's pretty interesting to know, at least, my understanding kind of clarified here. You said that there is a chance of getting the diabetes in the future for the baby, right? That's what you mentioned. But is this the case for the baby, or for the mother, or baby, or both? What are the chances? Can you please, a little bit explain?
Okay, if the woman has a gestational diabetes during pregnancy, if she doesn't lose weight and maintain the proper BMI, the recommended BMI, and if she's overweight, she has a 50% chance of developing diabetes in the next 5 years after getting gestational diabetes. And if the baby is born heavy, that means mom's blood sugars were not well controlled during pregnancy. And if the baby weighed more than 9 pounds at birth, his chances of getting diabetes as an adult are more than 30%.
Okay, got it. Okay, thanks for the clarification on that. Now looking at this, type 1 diabetes, right? I mean, I see, what type 1 diabetes could be in children also, right? Or since they're born. But that's kind of a situation during the pregnancy. Would the gynecologist know about that this child is going to have a type 1 diabetes when born? Or is it
No.
something that you only know when the baby is delivered?
It's after delivery. If the baby is not doing well, it's called failure to thrive, where they are not gaining weight and they are losing weight, and they may have some other signs, and then they check for sugar. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. That means their own body attacks the pancreas and destroys the pancreas, so the pancreas is not able to produce insulin. So we can live without insulin for no more than 24 hours. So if someone is a type 1 diabetic, they are insulin dependent for their survival. They still need to follow the diet and other things to maintain the control, but they need insulin for survival.
Okay, so that's, but this particular case is not kind of a curable. They have to kind of live with it, right? Right?
Yeah, they have to live with
Okay.
it.
Got it. Okay. Now, here's the thing. So, Dr. Amit, these are all the things, preventative, and then so many kind of medical advancements make us actually helping us so many variations. But here is the thing, right? We hear in the community from time to time, very engaged, like 30s, and then very fit and kind of exercising all that stuff. And also they do annual checkups. But still, we are seeing some kind of unfortunate incidents, Dr. Amit. Can you just, put some light on it? What actually is going on?
Right, right. Yeah. I know, there were a few celebrities who had an unfortunate end when they started exercising and all. Yeah. So people could be apparently healthy, like on the face of it, they could be healthy, right? But then you can have something called as soft plaques. So suppose someone is in the 40s, especially South Asians, right? So when you're in your 40s and you've had a fairly, let's call him a moderate Indian lifestyle, okay, who is not exercising much, but he's fairly fit and who's eating regular stuff with the Western influence. He goes out to restaurants and eats and then drinks and may or may not smoke. He may look healthy. But then what happens is in the blood vessels, you have what you call soft plaques. All the cholesterol and all that starts building up in the blood vessels, right? So one day you decide, okay, I want to go and start exercising. I need to lose weight, I need to get fitter, and I go and start exercising. So what happens is when you put pressure on your heart, when you're on the blood vessels, there could be a rupture of those plaques. Those atherosclerotic plaques, those collections that are formed on the inside of the blood vessels, the cholesterol plaques, they could rupture and that could trigger a heart attack. Now, if that goes unrecognized and then they continue exercising, that could make it worse. And that, as you said, if the blood vessel gets completely occluded, okay, completely closed, then that could result in some of these dangerous rhythms, which we are talking about, the ventricular fibrillation, and that could cause cardiac arrest. And that's how most of them die. The other thing is they could have unrecognized conditions or congenital conditions of the heart, which is actually a minority of the cases. Okay. The number one cause of young people or athletes dying is actually unknown. All right. That's the number one cause. In some people, about 30% of the people, they could have abnormalities of the heart, like they could have thickening of the heart, or they could have some other abnormalities of the heart, like syndromes like Brugada syndrome or ARVC. These are all syndromes or conditions of the heart that can cause them to go into abnormal rhythms. Their blood vessels may be okay, but this is a problem with the electrical system of the heart. Okay, or it predisposes them to develop electrical dangerous rhythms of the heart. So that's another reason. Yeah. I think you're muted. Chini, you're muted, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Got it. So thank you. So doctor, I mean, we got, see, thank you so much for this sharing. But here is the thing, right? As a common man, you doctors educating all of us, and then kind of giving us the, follow this and, practice this, and then you'll be, more not chances of having, right? But here's the thing, right? The reasons what you mentioned, it's not only the celebrities what we actually heard about this, but I personally even kind of heard about, a couple of cases. These guys actually, just like, technology professionals, 40s, and same logic. But unknowns are the always unknowns, right? But here's the thing, Dr. Amit, all the, soft plaque, what you mentioned, unrecognized, are there any ways that these can be findable?
Yeah.
With your medical tests? That's the
Yeah,
question.
so that's a good question. So you must have heard of something called as a calcium score, right? So that's actually a very cheap test. You can, I think most of the diagnostic imaging places are now, is just a CT scan of the heart, and that will tell us if there are any calcium deposits where the blood vessels of the heart are. Okay. However, this is a okay test for screening. If you want to just use a cheap test to screen a population, or someone who has some kind of vague symptoms, you can say, okay, go and get a calcium score. This it can only, the calcium deposits happen when the when the plaque gets mature, when the plaque buildup is there and starts getting calcium deposits. Okay, so these you could actually miss soft plaques. So if you want to really detect soft plaques, there is something called as coronary CT angiogram. The gold standard test is getting an angiogram. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is getting a stress test. You can do a stress test where you can walk on a treadmill, and then you can do a sonogram of the heart or a nuclear stress test. That will also tell you the functional aspect of your heart. Then the third thing is doing something called as a CCTA, or a coronary CT angiogram, wherein it's a non-invasive test, wherein you can look into your blood vessels, look at soft plaques, and also look at if there's any other abnormality in the chest, in the heart function, everything. Okay, so you have simple tests like EKG, echocardiogram, sonogram of the heart, then a stress test. Then you go into the CCTA, which is a non-invasive way of telling what the blood vessels are. So in South Asians, and again, this is my personal opinion, that you should go for a CCTA. If you don't want to do a coronary angiogram, which is they go inside your heart, put a small tube through your blood vessel into your heart, shoot some dye and take pictures of the blood vessels of your heart, that's invasive. But if you want a non-invasive, some test of your heart that will tell you the status of your blood vessels, then the CCTA, or coronary CT angiogram, is the way to go.
Okay. I mean, that's a lot of actually, you know what? My follow-up questions are stress test and calcium. I see you touched upon it, but that's beautiful. Okay, stress test, calcium score, and CCTA, and then you mentioned the other one. I cannot remember. I cannot say it again. But that you have said. But that's the reason we have recorded. We're recording this session. All our community members can actually go back and then watch these. But here is the thing. Question for you. On this topic, on this particular thing. Question: are these tests are covered by the typical insurance? Because that's one another hiccup, right?
Right. So the echoes and the stress tests are typically covered. Okay, the stress echoes and all that are typically covered. Stress tests are all covered. The calcium score, some insurances do cover it. Okay, but that's just a screening test. But the CCTA, which is the coronary angiogram, CT angiogram, that one nowadays, if you have chest pain and you get the doctor to order it, some insurances have started to cover it. Yes, but even otherwise, it costs about $1,000. If you want to just pay cash pay, it's about $1,000.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
But not everyone does it though. You have to be careful. Just a caveat: not all centers which have CT scan does it. You need a special kind of CT scan and a special software. Okay, so you have to make sure that the center has it.
Oh, okay, got it. Makes sense. By the way, I know I'm only actually saying all the questions, but here is the thing: there are a lot of appreciations for all of you doctors. Sharing this information. Everybody, shared their kind of impression that this is great information, very useful information that they can take for themselves and also share with others. This is awesome. Love it. And if anyone actually, I know a lot of people actually in the the YouTube, watching on YouTube. And are there any questions in YouTube live, or anyone actually joined Zoom can actually ask any question? Please do so before I actually get ready for my next question. And then we're going to keep it for 8 more minutes. I think we're definitely past the time, but anyone has any questions? Okay, while you actually get prepared, I have one more. So this is the thing, right? I mean, with all these things, a combination of blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol. If someone has all these three, what kind of I'm sure this is definitely the highest danger zone for the heart related diseases or heart attacks. But docs, any of you can actually answer this. If one has these three combination, blood pressure, diabetes, and cholesterol, what is the one they must, in a bullet pointed, just because you explained, you both explained in a very in detail, but as a bullet pointed, okay, they should actually, take care of this, take care of this, take care of this. So if you can share quickly, that would be awesome.
Okay. So, if there's one thing that they have to look at and make sure that they're doing it right, is diet. You have to fix your diet. Simple sugars, processed sugars have to be cut. Okay, have to be decreased. Okay, it should not be more than 5 to 10% of your diet. Number 2 is, of course, under the supervision of a physician, they have to address all these things, right? All three, the cholesterol, hypertension, and diabetes, have to be addressed under supervision of a physician. But when it comes to a lifestyle modification, then diet, exercise, and also things that will help both of these, in an indirect way, is going to be your sleep. People don't give enough credit to sleep. It's not an optional lifestyle anymore. It is as important as your diet and exercise, right?
Okay.
And that's what I try to incorporate in my talks. But of course, these things have to be addressed to prevent or mitigate CVD.
I think that's a good summary for the people who actually have this combination, right? But Dr. Amit, at the same time here, is it a myth or some kind of what it is? I know some says somewhere someone says if you stand, you yourself as actually standing on the floor, and then if you look down, you stand on the floor. If you look down, if you cannot see your feet clearly, would that actually give any indication that you are prone to heart attacks or something?
That's correct. That's a good point, because that means that you have belly fat or abdominal fat. And abdominal fat is the worst kind of fat. It affects every aspect. Because what happens is the fat that's there gets absorbed, and then it affects your entire system. It affects your respiratory system. Okay, you have something called as obesity hyperventilation. You have deposits of these fats on your muscle fibers, right? There is also the data that's shown that when you have abdominal fat, then the capillaries, that means the little blood vessels, the small blood vessels that go and supply your blood to your muscles, okay, those get pruned, those get shorter. That means you're not getting enough blood supply to your muscles, your peripheral muscles, all your skeletal muscles. There's also proof that's shown, data that's showing that each muscle fiber, it affects the functioning of the fiber, so that abdominal fat. So when all this is getting affected, there's also an increased risk of plaque formation, atherosclerosis, and an increased risk of heart attacks when you have abdominal girth. In fact, Dr. Gangi can talk more about it. This combination of called metabolic syndrome, which is a combination of increased abdominal girth, goes along with low HDL, high triglycerides, and insulin resistance. It's called the metabolic syndrome, which is very bad for cardiovascular disease.
Wow. Okay. So it's not a myth. That's right.
So-
You can measure it. You can kind of get to that.
Let me add one more thing. I mentioned
Please.
one more thing, Chiniji. I mentioned about exercise. I mentioned about weight training. I said it's not just aerobic is good. If you can't do anything else, if you cannot do anything else, then cardiorespiratory exercise or cardio is okay. Walking, brisk walking, running is good. Okay. But in addition to that, if you add some weight training, then the weight training helps to decrease your abdominal girth. Also, it helps you with your insulin resistance. People with diabetes, if they have some build muscles, it'll make them more sensitive to insulin. So weight training is very important. Don't discount that.
Okay. Okay, got it. I think this is good. You know what? In terms of the, I really love that Live the Dream campaign. I love it. We, like I said, we are going to support in whatever the way we can during your presidencyship, Dr. Amit, and the WAM USA, and actually across the globe, we are going to support your campaign. We really love it. Now on that aspect, but this is the thing, right? Telling the truth is one thing, but solution is important. But Dr. Amit, please, please, please help us. Tell us, how do we actually make that abdominal fat disappear? I know it is a kind of tricky question. Please, please help us. We are serious. We are serious.
No, I think all the points that are said in Live the Dream, I mean, we came up with this with a lot of thought. Okay, it's not each one of those things you have to look at. Of course, diabetes and lipid control is all quite intuitive, but the other things, right? Eat right and exercise. For example, if you eat simple sugars, and do this experiment tonight, and this is of course with personal experience, and I've heard grandmother's tales, you could call it, but my grandma used to say, oh, when you eat rice in the afternoon, your stomach bloats up. And that is true, because it's the way it is metabolized. Like how Dr. Gangi Sumana made a point, not all calories are the same. When you get calories from simple sugars, added sugars, processed foods, okay, those go directly into your girth. Whereas when you have an apple or vegetables, like for example, sugar, just to eat about this much of sugar, right, is about this much of celery sticks, literally a huge plate of celery or cabbages. If you eat that much cabbage, then it's good for your health, right? That's what many animals do, right? So that's one thing. Then exercising, the right way of exercising. Also, it's not something that can be done overnight. You didn't accumulate this abdominal fat overnight, right? It was years and years. So it's going to start somewhere. Cut your one simple thing: no soda with either diet or any kind of soda or sugar drinks. You just cut that, and then you see the difference. That's number one. Okay. And then watch what you eat. What we recommended. Half of it should be vegetables and fruits, and then the other quarter should be your whole grains, bread and chapatis, which are made with whole grains, and with proteins. One fourth should be your proteins, healthy proteins, and healthy fats. You just stick to these things, and you will see the difference.
Wow.
Otherwise, there is no magic bullet. There is no magic bullet. Let me tell you that.
Low carb diet is the key to lower the abdominal adiposity. So
Yes.
avoiding the processed carbs, keeping the carbohydrate intake less than 20% of your total calories is the key to start the weight loss at the waist.
Wow. Okay. That's good news though. That's good news though. That's so it can be disappear. You can make it disappear, right? The abdominal fat. That's awesome.
I have a quick question on the sugar. So what's the difference between sugar and honey? Is honey better than sugar?
No difference.
It's carbs, it's the same.
Same thing.
Carbs
Simple
are carbs.
Yeah.
It's
No, honey is not. No.
that honey is natural and it is better. Sugar is processed, so it's not good. No, it is still the carb. It raises your insulin. It does the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Oh my!
Yes.
Oh, wow, that's good. That's good to know. I mean, that was actually in my list. Someone actually from India actually asked that question. Thanks, Kishore, for bringing that up. That's good to know. Now, Dr. Gangi, you mentioned that, right? Nervous system complications in your presentation and things like carpal tunnel or frozen shoulder, right? That kind of, you mentioned that those are the things that the people who are already experiencing diabetes, right? But my
Yes.
question to you is this a signal that one can take if they are kind of repeatedly getting these symptoms, carpal tunnel or any kind of nervous system complications, that is it a signal that they may be getting into the diabetics mode in the future?
So the neuropathy may be a sign that a person might have diabetes. Neuropathy is the tingling and numbness in the hands and feet, more so in the lower extremities. So a lot of times, as I said, diabetes is a silent killer. Unless the sugars are very high, people don't experience any symptoms. And they may think that, they're feeling good, and if they don't go for routine physicals and evaluation, they may miss the early onset of diabetes. And then once they start having neuropathy signs, then it could be from diabetes. There are many reasons that people can develop neurological issues, and diabetes is one of them. And if we see people coming in complaining that they have a neurological pain, tingling, numbness, burning sensation, first thing we do is to check for diabetes. And B12 deficiency is also another very common finding we see in Southeast Asians. Vitamin B12 is in whole grains and pulses, but nowadays everything is fried and whatever. Most of the times we don't eat the whole things, right? It's all processed. The skin is taken off. So we lose certain vitamins. One of them is the B12. So especially vegetarians or vegans, B12 deficiency is very common, and that can cause the neuropathy too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like I said, in the lifestyle, the side of thing, we have a bucket load of questions. Probably we'll actually, ask, all of you in our next session in the next year. But here is a question for you on that aspect, a similar way. You know what people say sometimes, or you hear about it, obese are kind of a people who have, overweight or potential to diabetes. But is it a myth or is it a reality, or what is it actually? People who actually really thin, not like a thin, but thin, no obese, no nothing, whatever it is. What are the chances of that they're, when they say they're going, oh, I'm not, I don't work out. When people say, no, I'm workout, but people say, hey, you're not overweight. What do you wanted to work out? But for those people who are actually, the weight maintain people, what are the chances, or is it equal chances of getting into diabetes, or what is this actually? Can you please elaborate on that?
It depends on the genetic risk, right? If you look at the Indian population, not many are obese, right? We call them as a lean diabetics, but they are genetically prone to develop insulin resistance. So if you see a typical Indian male who has diabetes, they are not overweight, they are not obese. Their BMI may be actually on the lower end, but they do have the tummy fat, abdominal adiposity, and they have insulin resistance. So the exercise should be for everybody, irrespective of their body habitus, their weight, because it has additional benefits, not just controlling diabetes. It improves the cardiovascular health. So weight, of course, in US, people, when they're obese, their risk for diabetes goes up. And even in Southeast Asians, if they are overweight, their risk is higher. But there are people who are lean and severely insulin resistant. We call them as skinny fat people. It's very common, that entity in Southeast Asians.
Oh boy. So there is no discount for people who maintain and then lean, right? There's the same equal chance.
Still have to get it checked and make sure. It all depends on your risk factors.
Okay, got it. Dr. Gangi, I mean, you mentioned in your presentation, right, that you said that there is the protein leakage in urine is one of those signals that could, tell you that, prone to diabetes or whatnot. If they see, protein leakage in their urine test on an annual physical, so what is it actually telling, and what should they actually do next?
So when people have diabetes or pre-diabetes, right, the damage to the kidney starts very early on. And the first sign of kidney damage is leaking the microprotein in the urine. So when we do the annual physicals, if they do the urine check and check for microprotein, if it is positive, first thing is to make sure their sugars are under control. Second thing is their blood pressure is under control. And the third thing is there are medications that can help to reverse the damage. That is why we want to do them early, because at certain early periods of the disease progress, they are all reversible. Once they get more advanced, we can reverse them.
Okay, got it. Got it. But what about in a case that, okay, this patient or this particular person is not a patient of diabetes, but all is well. But if they do see a protein leakage in their urine in their annual physicals, what does it tell?
It could be from other forms of kidney disease. Like, there are intrinsic kidney disease, like acute tubular necrosis, like, there are other forms of kidney disease. So whenever we see protein in the urine, we worry about the kidney damage from multiple sources. One of them is diabetes. And if they are not diabetic, we worry about high blood pressure causing kidney damage, or a structural kidney damage where their kidney structure can itself is getting damaged.
Got it. Okay. Now the next question is, we are so optimistic, right? We feel we are healthy, we're doing, great, and then we don't have any bad habits or whatsoever, even though which we don't know, right? But here is the thing, right? Let's say if some diabetic conditions is unnoticed, and then it goes all the way up, and then you mentioned, right, there are some side effects they're going to see. It effects of eyes, and nervous, kind of issues, shaking hands or whatnot, right? But now they figured it out, and then when they kind of start their treatment, are these side effects reversible? Are they irreversible?
To some extent, they are reversible depending on how early the damage is. Like, for example, if they have bleeding in the back of the eye because of diabetes, controlling the sugars actually helps to minimize the damage. But if they already has a profuse bleeding, it is not reversible. They need to go for laser treatments or some injections that they inject into the eye to stop the bleeding. So it depends on how early we are finding out the damage.
Oh man, I love it. You docs have a lot of patience. As it is, you have a patience, but even in the weekends, you all have a lot of patience, answering all our questions. But this is definitely helpful for our community. Thank you so much. And in the last lines that what I have is, Dr. Amit, you know what, when you actually mentioned that in your presentation, 150 minutes, you know what I thought? It's per day. But when actually Dr. Gangi mentioned that's a 150 per week, what a bonus!
Yeah,
What a
just 30
bonus,
minutes.
Amit.
30
Yeah,
minutes every
30
for 5 days
30
a week.
minutes. Come on, yeah, come
It's
on.
not a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, that's lovely. I mean, just 30 minutes per day. What else we can ask for, right? To prevent all these issues. This is amazing. But as you are there, Dr. Amit, in general, for your patients or whatever, you wanted to share some resources or websites. What are the resources or websites you would actually refer or guide them for all your patients or in general, so that they can actually, get more information or updates? Are there any such resources that you have that you can share here,
Sure.
or
So one is
websites or
the
anything?
one is the American Heart Association. They have a great patient portal, and they have some excellent information on almost all cardiac diseases and stroke, and also, of course, it touches on a little bit of diabetes and all those things. Then the other organization is the Heart Rhythm Society, which is my organization, because I'm an electrophysiologist. So that's another good source. And then, so these are the two main organizations that they can have plenty of information, and very legit information, which they can take without, as it is, because these have been written by experts. So I think these two are excellent sources of information for anybody. Who
Beautiful.
wants to.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. And the same lines, Dr. Gangi, for diabetic related, are there any resources that you can share with us?
Yeah, American Diabetic Association has a great website. And there is another one called dlife.com. It has a lot of resources, recipes, and low carb education. The one I also follow, I'm a big proponent of intermittent fasting. So and a low carb diet. So the website that I use is the dietdoctor.com, dietdoctor.com. It is by Dr. Fung, Jason Fung. He's a nephrologist in Canada. He's a forerunner in terms of the intermittent fasting and advising low carb diet.
Beautiful. Love it. Love it. Personally, I know we're from, we know that what is actually the definition of intermittent fasting. What we do, we relearn intermittent fasting from India and here recircle, but we practice. That's awesome. I also actually practice this thing. But here is the thing. This is a great information, great sharing, and thank you so much for. I know Elo Angas actually, invite you to come here and then share with us. And before I actually give this to WAM Priya. So the easy question for both of you. Easy question to both of you. Organic food does really matters, does really make a difference in the whole world.
Yes, it does. Because nowadays, if you look at the farming or the poultry, there is a lot of pesticides being used. And if you look at the dairy, like, the cows are fed with a lot of hormones. So if you check the milk from commercial milk source and measure their estrogen and the growth hormone, the levels were higher than the organic milk. So it does matter. Any food that you can take off the skin, like, bananas or like oranges, whether it's organic or not, probably not much difference. But any foods that you eat with the peel on, like grapes, apples, and things like that, that should be organic. And the
Beautiful.
dairy should be organic. Dairy and meat, I recommend to be organic.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. Dr. Amit, what's your way?
No, I think I agree with what Dr. Dangi said. Yeah, I think she summed it up nicely about this.
Beautiful. Love it. Love it. All right. With that, thank you so much again, everyone. Yeah. Any last, lines? Any last lines from both of you?
No, I said from my side, I said, hashtag live the dream. That's why we made a slogan that's very simple. Put in stuff which nobody thinks about, like adequate sleep, things about exercise, about lifestyle, mind-led lifestyle, and mindfulness. These may seem like very esoteric, not relevant, but these are as relevant as diabetes control with the help of a physician, hypertension control, and of course, low carb diet. That would be my takeaway.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You know what? At WAM USA, we believe, health is wealth. So we will definitely help and support in whatever the way that your campaign wanted to be succeeded to reach the goals, Dr. Amit. And wish you all the best for that.
Chinny,
yeah. Any last lines for Dr. Gangi?
Okay.
Yeah.
I always believe an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. So please take care of your health. And as you mentioned, health is wealth. So nothing precious more than your own health.
Beautiful. Please stand at standby. And what? WAM Priya is going to be taking care from here. And then we're going to have a president's speech here. WAM USA president. WAM Priya, please go ahead. Thank you so much for giving me this long WAM Priya.
Thank you, Mr. Chinigaru. Thank you, our honorable speakers today, our guests today. I really love the campaign that you guys are working towards, Live the Dream. Wish you all the best for both our guests here. And it's really an abundance of knowledge that we all learned today. Thank you so much for sharing so much valuable information with us, and especially seeing the CPR demo live. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of our community people here. Special thanks to all our honorable guest doctors who are here today to help our community for better living in spite of, as I said, your busy schedule. So hope you all enjoyed today's health session. I would say stay tuned for more and more sessions on our health, finance, women empowerment, education, and more. And for those of you who don't know, we also have social media that we are also there on social media on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and WhatsApp. So please follow us on any of these. And as we know, sharing is caring. So please share with all your friends who can benefit from these interactive sessions. And stay warm, enjoy your holidays, and stay healthy. I would like to hand over to our president, Srinivas Garu, to conclude. Thank you.
Thanks, Priya. I think Dr. Amit and Dr. Gangi and Kishore, I think you guys share a valuable information. I don't want to keep on repeat saying valuable information since already everybody in this call, they were listening what you guys are and what sort of information you provided. So I don't want to say this as a speech, but just let you know that this is an organization we formed in the US. Within a span of 5 months time, we built a team. And within a span of 2 weeks time, you both accepted our invitation. And really, the whole kind of effort went on this. And under the direction of Chini, this is the first program we conducted. And we were so happy, even though in spite of allocating time for 1 hour, 1.5 hour max, but this is like a 2.5 hours call went on. And I'm seeing people were like posting many questions even till last minute. Probably, definitely, we should have one more session. And once again, I thanks each and everyone, especially my team, who put all their efforts and make this happen. And before ending this call, I just want to introduce even my global advisor, Venkat Perlagaru. He is from our great White House team, Trump team, and he's like serving this country for more than 10 years. So WAM USA comes, even me to enter into WAM, the credit goes to him. He's the one who brought me here. And this is where we have ended up. But the plan is this is not the, what do you call it, end of the story. This is where we begin. And the first episode went very well. And probably there will be more invitations and more brotherings and more questions comes from our team across the globe. And this telecast will going to be, I think probably we have a 50 world connections with this group. So almost, I think most of the world people, they're going to see your faces and the valuable advices you gave. It's not, I think this is not the solutions, whatever you provide just pertains to the US environment. So this is something a common, which is nowadays like hitting after pandemic, like people are like, the way they are undergoing and their mindsets, and apart from the kind of food they are having. So there are so many factors causing this. But yes, this kind of mentoring is always required. And I really thank to both of you once again, and especially what you call CPR. This is really an interesting thing which went coincided with the diabetic and cardiac topic. So I really appreciate each and everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chinni, and everyone team. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having us.